6 to 7 Figure Show, episode 12. Ready? Let's hit it.
Broadcasting from the Valley of the Sun outside Phoenix, Arizona. This is the 6 to 7 Figure Show. Tired of working so hard and having no time? Take your six-figure practice and turn it to a thriving seven-figure enterprise. And now, your host, author, speaker, mentor, and strategist, Frank Bria.
Welcome to the 6 to 7 Figure Show. I'm your host, Frank Bria, and today's episode, we are talking with Wendy Williams, relationship coach with Connect Again. And Wendy works with couples who are married and are looking for wellness in their relationship, and she does a much better job of explaining that. I'm going to let her do that. But today we're working with her on books, using book as a strategy, becoming an author, to elevate her authority platform and to go deeper into her into what she does and to creating monetization potential in her business, scaling, going beyond just one-on-one working with couples or individuals. So we're going to talk to Wendy about that. But before we get that, this week is all about books and authorship. And there's a lot of conversation going on this week over at the Scale to Success Facebook page. So join us there. You can get your personalized invitation by going to frankbria.com. Right smack in the middle of the page is step 2. Step 1 is subscribe to the podcast. You're already here. Step 2 is join us at the Scale to Success Facebook group. It is totally free. All you need to do is click on that, get yourself an invitation, and join us there. You can search for us on Facebook at the Scale to Success Facebook group. And with that, we will dive right into our hot seat conversation with Wendy Williams. And Wendy, welcome. Thanks so much for being with us today. How are you today?
I'm well. Hey, thanks, Frank, very much for inviting me to join you today. I appreciate it.
Oh, no, our pleasure. So, Wendy, what are you up to? Tell us about your business. Tell us what great things you've got going on right now.
Okay, I'll tell you what I'm not. I'm not a marriage educator. I'm not a marriage therapist, and I'm not a marriage counselor. I'm a marriage educator, which brings me into the realm of wellness and health, regular old wellness and health regarding relationships rather than the sickness model, which, counseling and therapy could be considered going to the doctor for your broken leg and getting a cast and limping around and getting a lot of pity. A wellness model is more like, hey, we all have relationships. How do I take care of it? Sort of like everybody has a cardiac system. How do I get off the couch and really take care of myself? So that's kind of what I do.
That's a really powerful opening. It sounds like this contrast between the sickness model, as you call it, and the wellness model is a big, big deal in your industry.
Yeah, I think it is, and it's also something that it isn't talked about as much as it could be or should be. The average couple waits about 6 years before they raise their hand and they say, "Ow, something's hurting, something's not right, this is really bad." So can you imagine walking around for 6 years with a toothache, Frank?
Right. No.
No. You
I'm a wimp when it comes to pain.
Sooner.
That's right.
Yeah. So the interesting thing is to try to kind of awaken the possibility that, hey, I could be feeling and enjoying my relationship in a new and better level in year 1, 2, 3, or 4 or 5 before that 6th year breaking point. Is there a way to have people kind of awaken to the possibility of feeling really, really good as opposed to tired and sluggish?
Right. That's phenomenal. Now, how do you get that message out now? What is your platform for delivering that message out to the world?
Primarily through speaking in local areas and kind of getting that out. Again, we all know in marketing and sales, it's a pain point that you're trying to get at. And that's been a kind of a struggle, to be honest with you, is what's the pain point? Because, again, pain point is reached in year 6, and by that point they really are broken and they really do need serious medical attention. So that's not beyond necessarily what I can do, but I'd like to get them a little bit sooner and I want to get into preventive medicine, right?
Right.
So
sure.
What's helpful is to kind of go out into the community or go out into local networking groups and give talks that have to do with kind of funny ha-ha, sort of Mars, women are from Mars and men are from, or the other way around, men are from Mars, women are from Venus sort of talks, like the gender differences that everybody can go, oh yeah, ha ha ha. And then I kind of sprinkle those talks with my clients, and they find, and when they're in a struggle and when they're in a negative loop, we can kind of help and bring them up out of it, and kind of, when the guy drives home in the driveway, your heart doesn't clench in 3 places and say, oh, please God, let's tonight not fight, kind of thing. So.
Yeah, that's interesting. I mean, I would imagine it's interesting you point out sort of the 6-year mark where people sort of say, okay, yeah, it's time. It seems to me that the pain has been happening all of that time. It's just that no one recognized it as pain.
Right, or they kind
then.
of say there must be a way that maybe when our baby isn't in diapers, it'll get better. Maybe when, so there's an underlying, you're driving me crazy, or I drive you crazy, or whatever, but it isn't to the point of raising your hand and asking for external help. That's the marker. And it isn't necessarily the 6th year of the marriage. It could be, 6 years after, our kids, whatever, something bad happened to our kid in high school, and we saw things so differently, and there was a breach in our relationship then, and it might take 6 years, so they're 21 years married or something like that, if that makes sense.
Right.
So it's 6 years of
totally
living with an issue, living with pain.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah.
Right. So, and one of the things that you're thinking about is putting an ebook together. So talk about that. What is it you want to accomplish with an ebook?
Well, I'll tell you, the thing that I want to accomplish with an ebook is what I think a lot of people who are thinking seriously about their business and getting clients is to be introduced, or to introduce myself as a speaker and an author. And so I'm thinking that ebook, meaning it's easier access and it's usually a smaller amount of pages, although I've downloaded some ebooks from some of the people I admire out there in the coaching world, and they're 113-page PDF or whatever. But that aside, so a publication that I'm thinking an ebook is quote unquote a lower hanging fruit for me as a writer, as an author, but I might have that wrong, Frank. I don't know. Maybe I do need to kind of go the self-published Amazon route in order to be justifiably called an author. So I ask you, what do you say?
Well, I think you can call yourself an author whenever you feel like it.
Oh, I like that.
I don't think there's a rule of thumb here, but I would dig a little bit deeper, because I would say, great, so you're introduced as an author, so now what?
Well, then that gives that certain amount of street cred. I know I perk up when somebody holds up a book, and tonight we're glad to introduce somebody that's going to talk to us about Men Are From Mars, Women Are From Venus, and she's published this wonderful book. They're at the back of the room to be sold. Now, that's not going to be the revenue stream, but it is the thing that gives people go, oh, okay, let me sit up a little bit straighter and take out my pen a little sooner.
Okay, yeah, I agree with you there, and I believe all of that. I'm just trying to tie this through, it's to be crass, to money. So, do you raise your speaking fees? Do you sell more product to the people who are in the room? What's your thinking on how that monetizes for you?
Well, I guess it just, to be honest, I had only thought about this as far as to say, this woman knows what she's talking about. She's written a book, somebody's published it, and so, or whatever.
Right.
And so therefore she's an expert, and so what she says goes, and if she makes an offer at the end of a talk, we got something going on here, we've got a product, or we've got this coaching sessions that we can offer you, and you don't even have to live in state or whatever, that it just seems like something that people are going to be able to give more credence to. I hadn't thought of it being any more than a line of credibility for me to be heard and listened to with more earnestness and thought of as an expert. But
yeah, I mean, I think you get all of that with a book for sure. Yeah. But I don't think you get it like by osmosis. Like, I think you definitely want a strategy for positioning that book to your audience. Okay. And I think there are great ways to do it. So let's dig into that a little bit. So first, let me back up. what have you written so far? Like, do you have any experience with writing blogs or articles or guest posts or anything like that?
Yeah, I have. I was a content writer for two medically related websites. One was for people with chronic pain, so patients, quote unquote, with chronic pain, and another one was for providers, doctors and nurses and others who took care of people with chronic pain. So some of the content was at the ubiquitous, 6th grade level for the regular person on the street, and then the others was more academic writing, more citations and all that kind of stuff, but and with the focus of helping them with their practice. So try to kind of get right into the subject matter early on and make it pertinent so that they didn't have to sit on the website and read for 12 hours, that kind of thing. Okay. So that's some writing that I've done, and writing for newsletters and stuff for different organizations. But I've been an entrepreneur and out here on my own in the last couple of years, and I have not been doing blogging but routinely, but I am starting to do that now, and I could go on about that. But so suffice it to say, I do have writing experience. I work with a health communications group, my last full-time regular job, and learned a lot there about how ubiquitous my passive voice was, and I've struck that from my repertoire, I hope. But yeah.
Well, I'm a former academic writer, so that's my problem big time. I do that.
Oh my goodness gracious! Yeah, it was required.
Yeah. Exactly.
Anyway.
Right. Did you notice I just did it when I said that happens to me all the time?
It's
I didn't even take responsibility for the fact that I was the one who did it myself.
That's right. It's harder for me to pick it up in verbal conversations. Much easier for me to see it on the page, but I get you.
Sure. So when you've written, so I want to focus specifically on the talks that you give. So the material around marriage wellness. Do you have a lot of existing written content in terms of blogs now,
no.
How much of that have you done?
Not a lot.
Not much.
No.
Okay.
And I have heard that's. I mean, I don't mean to jump the shark here, if that's the correct expression.
No,
but I have heard that that's a really good way, is to kind of just take everything that you've already done and put it in some sort of orderly fashion for an ebook or a book.
Sure, if you have it.
Right. If
sure.
you right,
but
you have it.
If you don't, it's not the flip side doesn't, it's not like someone would say, well, go blog for a year and then you could become an author. Like, I don't buy into that.
Thank you, God. So, I'm so glad.
There are definitely ways of getting through it. So, okay. So you have you certainly are a writer. Would you say that from a content perspective, you're more comfortable sitting down and writing or speaking?
Well, that's a really good question. I would say speaking.
Okay. Then there is a quick way to get an ebook out, like super, super quick way. And I'll just throw out a couple of suggestions. So first of all, if the point is for you to just get something out there, okay, the easiest thing for you to do is to do what I like to call the FAQ version of an ebook, okay? And it's not it's probably not a deep content piece, but it's great. And that is basically my suggestion is sit down and write down 10 of the most frequently questions questions you get asked about marriage and marriage wellness, okay? And then sit down and write down 10 of the questions you wish people would ask you.
Oh, okay.
And then take a recorder, and I love the app I like is Rev, R-E-V. Rev.com is online. Rev, it's Apple. It's for your iPhone and for an Android. And literally, you press the button, you start talking into it, and when you're done, you hit send. And after you put all your credit card information in, somebody will transcribe it and send it back to you for $1 a minute, and it's written. Now, of course, it's not edited for book yet, right?
No,
there's another step you could have. But what you've done is you've just created, and you take literally one of these questions a day, and then in basically 4 business weeks, you've got all of the content done. You spend 3 to 5 minutes just talking about each of those different questions.
So 3 to 5 minutes per. So there's 20 questions. So 3 to 5 minutes per question. Okay.
Yep. And that'll give you a really good ebook chapter on each of those questions. And when you're done, you'll want to put an intro and a conclusion kind of wrapper on the whole thing, which, depending on your writing skill, either you can do that, or if you would prefer to work with a developmental editor on it, you hire an editor and have them write a summary and a conclusion chapter for you.
Can I ask you what a developmental editor is?
Absolutely. Let's talk about that. So there's two kinds of editors that you can work with, okay? The type of editor that most people are familiar with is a copy editor. This is somebody who's literally going to be checking grammar and passive voice.
There you go.
Talking about it. So they're looking for all that stuff. A developmental editor is going to come in at a much more fundamental role in your book. They're going to help you with structure. They're going to be the people who say, ooh, you know what? Chapter 3 really should be Chapter 5, and Chapter 6 should probably be Chapter 1. They're also going to help with sentence structure and with things like, you know, Wendy, I know what you're trying to say here, but you're not really saying it very well. Or, ooh, you know what, Wendy, you really need an example here. Can you tell a story that backs up this point that you're trying to make? They're going to push more on that content piece. And for first-time authors, I highly recommend that when you go hire an author, that you ask for developmental editing. Certainly, it's a little more expensive. It's not crazy expensive, but it's more expensive. But it's well worth it, because a good developmental editor can partner with you to get the content put together well. And if you find a good developmental editor who is also a ghostwriter, then you can actually have them fill in some of these gaps for you. So, again, depending on your preference for writing, some people write, but they hate it. Some people, prefer to speak. Some people, they just got a mental block with this. So in this 20-question format, I find there's a lot of different ways to skin that cat. One is to say, look, I just am going to send it off to an editor and have them do a summary and a conclusion for this. They'll also help you organize the questions in a way that makes some sense. So, for example, you're just writing down any 20 questions in whatever order they come to your mind. There could be a natural order for those questions, right? One, you might order them in order of difficulty or in order of time span, right? There may be questions which are related to the engagement period, and then some questions which are related to right after you get married, and some for after, you've spent a little bit of time after the honeymoon period. So you might order it like that. But a developmental editor can really help you logically structure the content as well.
Okay, great. Did I ask you, I feel like I want to ask you, what is the difference between an ebook and a book?
Yeah, that's a great question. The only real difference is that one is on paper and one is not.
Okay.
However, I will tell you that generally speaking, there's no hard and fast rule over how long a book has to be in order for it to be published as a paperback. But it usually comes down to costing. Okay, so if you have 20 questions and you record 3 to 5 minutes on each one, you can end up with 100 pages out of that. Especially, absolutely.
Wow.
If you are recording that conversation with yourself, basically, and you get a good editor to help put the pieces in place on both sides of that, with the appropriate sort of trade publication size, 6x9 or smaller, you can easily end up with a very nice, small, thin, but still printed book out of it. And generally speaking, I find that, especially in these topics where people are looking for guidance and suggestions in their life, the self-help sort of genre, that thinner, smaller books are perfectly acceptable.
Okay.
So my feeling is that, there's no hard and fast rule to this, but 100 pages is a pretty good marker. If something's less than 100 pages, then you'd really have to sort of think about whether or not you want to put that together as a paperback. But if it goes over that 100-page mark, then by all means, absolutely put it out there as a paperback. And what's nice is...
I was just going to say 100 pages on 8.5 by 11, like a PDF of an ebook is 8.5 by 11. That would be less than 100 pages for those.
Exactly. Right. Well, what I would do is I would not structure this as an 8.5 by 11. So if you wrote on 8.5 by 11, it then looks like kind of a brochure, right? But I would make this look as much like a printed book. Even if you just did it as an ebook, I would make this as much like a printed book as you can. So that means that when you actually are finished writing and getting all the content together back from the editor, and you put it into, let's say, Word, Microsoft Word, or some other tool, there's a lot of different authoring tools out there. I would go ahead and reduce the size down to a trade publication size. And there's a lot of different options available for you. But I would say that like a 6 by 9 inch is a standard, one of the standard sizes.
Trade publication,
trade publication size. But there's also other sizes that are available. You can definitely do other sizes. So, you can go smaller than that as well. But if you reduce the paper size down to that in your Microsoft Word, you'll notice that it obviously extends out the length of the book. Other things that you do is you're going to make sure the font size is appropriate. So probably not a 10-point font, but maybe an 11-point font for the book. And then you might, I don't know, depending on the content, there may be diagrams or there may be pictures that you want to add. That's kind of nice. And if you have the ability, you can add some nice stock photo essentially throughout the book to kind of give it a little bit more of a visual feel. Now, keep in mind, you're going to be printing in black and white, so don't do anything that's going to be overly colorized because that will cost more money, and then when it's in black and white, it may lose some meaning. But some nice, and that's going to extend out the length. And I think you can easily, if you do that 20 questions exercise with a front and a back chapter, you essentially have a 22 chapter book.
Right. Wow, that's cool. I really like that. And so the only difference between a book and an ebook is one's printed and one's just downloadable online.
Yeah, that's it. That's the only difference. Yeah, and it's totally up to you. I mean, you may find that a smaller book even is worth printing if it's particularly valuable in your target market.
Graduate level, that could be, the next step. But getting something out there and saying, Wendy wrote this, and then of course I'd have to have a graphic designer person make it look good.
Yeah, so you definitely, absolutely, regardless if it's ebook or paperback, you absolutely want to get a graphic designer to do a really, really nice cover design for you. And depending on where you decide to publish this. So, for example, my recommendation, I recommend everyone to go to createspace.com with Amazon and just put the whole thing there. If you treat it like it's going to be a paperback, they will automatically add a Kindle ebook version for you. So you kind of get that a little bit, quote unquote, for free. Not exactly, but close enough.
How much is it How much is it typically to get like a 110-page 6x9 book Amazoned?
So it doesn't cost you a penny on Amazon. Amazon doesn't charge you anything at all. All of your costs are going to be in your people to help you get the thing put together. So the costs you're going to be focused on are going to be, first of all, you got a graphic designer who's going to help you put a cover together. Now, that can span you can go Fiverr all the way up to hiring a very, very sophisticated graphic designer. Now, I happen to think you can get a very good graphic designer on an outsourcing site like Elance, and for a few $100s, you can get an excellent cover design. You certainly can get something for less than that. I think you just don't want to go too far down that spectrum, right? So there's your one cost. You're going to have editorial costs.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So a developmental editor who does some ghostwriting
Mm-hmm.
for you is probably for a 100-page book is probably going to be somewhere between $500 to $700. Maybe a little bit more, maybe a little bit less, depending on the experience level. You obviously want to find someone who's done something in your genre before, who's got some experience, especially if you ask them to ghostwrite. You're going to want to check that out. You can pay more for an editor. I mean, I'm sure people listening to this right now are screaming, I charge $5,000 for editing. That's probably true. But you don't have to do that this first time out. There's time for that later. And then you're going to pay for any transcription that you do through automated, through if you use Rev, if let's say it's 5 minutes per chapter, so it's $100 for transcription, essentially. And those are really your costs for getting the book out there. Now, that doesn't cover marketing, right? But just getting it onto Amazon and having it for sale, that's pretty much all you need.
Great. So it's about a $1,500 or so. Is not out of whack. Yeah. Okay, great.
Nope, not at all. Not at all. And what that does is it allows you to get if you use Amazon and you do a paperback through them through createspace.com, they'll give you an ISBN number. That's that barcode they put on the back of books. The publisher becomes CreateSpace. In other words, it's an Amazon published book. You still own the intellectual property, but they stick the code on the back if anyone scans the code to figure out who the publisher is, it's Amazon. Yeah. So that's a way to know, it's a self-published book because Amazon's the publisher. Right. There's nothing wrong with that. It's not like you have to put an asterisk next to author. Right. Because you self-published. And then as you move through that process, you might look for help in typesetting the book. You might go out to a company who will take your Word document and make it really fancy for paperback. In other words, they might do fancy chapter headings and things like that. Right. And Amazon can do that too. That usually costs somewhere between $200 and $300, probably on the low end for a book that size. There's cheaper options available if you decide to hire someone yourself through like an Elance or an Odesk or something like that. And that'll make it look really pretty and everything in the paperback. And then some of those people will also create automatically the ebook version of it, but Amazon will do that as well. If you just upload the Microsoft Word file, they'll automatically transfer that over to Kindle, and then in Amazon you have your paperback and a Kindle version for sale under your name and title automatically.
Okay. Do they have certain requirements in terms of line spacing and stuff? No.
Nope.
Okay.
They have certain requirements in terms of the size of the book itself. Like there's certain ones that are standard, and then there are ones that are off schedule. And the only thing that really matters about that is printing costs. So when you print a 100-page paperback 6x9. It has a certain cost. If you decided to do something, a trim size that was very different than that, it might cost more because it's not their standard. But it's not like they say, oh, well, you've got to have double spacing or triple. That's totally up to you. I will say that Amazon does check visually as you go through the process to make sure things are looking pretty good. And they have a generic term of service called reader experience. So if they found that something just was really, really bad, then they would reject it and tell you to fix it. But it's usually not over stuff like line spacing. It's usually over stuff like misspellings like huge misspellings, or like in one case, I saw an ebook out there that wasn't done yet. Like they had published it, the first 5 chapters, and basically said, we're coming back to fix the rest of it. Stuff like that, Amazon's starting to crack down on. But if anyone puts out good professional content, I don't think they're going to really have trouble with that.
Okay, great. Wow. This is awesome.
So I still want to get to the big question, which is how do we monetize this?
Oh, yeah.
Because I agree that this is big, okay, and I think you definitely get credibility by putting that next to author, next to your description. And as you do speeches, it definitely is going to affect the audience, but it won't bring extra money in your pocket unless you do something about it. So let's talk about a couple of different ways to do this. So number one, have you thought about what this will do to your speaking fees?
No, I haven't.
So I would start to think about. So first of all, when you publish a book, you should increase your speaking fee.
Got it.
By how much, and it's going to be a broader discussion about your target market and what they're willing to pay. But get in the mindset that now you're an author, you're going to charge more. End of story. And anyone who already knows you should totally just go with it because you now are an author. So that's the way it goes. How does the ebook strategy fit in with how you make money from clients? Like, in other words, what is the core offering, service offering that you provide to your audience besides speaking?
The core offering is a individualized coaching session that lasts about 4 hours. That we teach. My husband and I will teach them a process to kind of come up and out of a bad, circular, never-ending. We're both defensive and just can't see the other person's perspective, crappy argument. And we teach them a way of coming up and out of that and kind of putting that never-ending story in the rearview mirror and having a very new and better way to kind of dig out of a hole like that. Okay.
So if that is where you want to lead people, you also want to lead your reader there as well. So in the book, after you've put the information together and you've gone through editing, or almost all the way through editing, you're going to want to add into the book hooks for people to understand what it is that you do. Now, I am not one of those fans of people who overly just push in the book. They basically tell you something and then say, oh, well, come online and buy blah, 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 blah. It's like, I already bought your book, right? But what you want to do is you want to indicate, I like to call it a content upgrade. Okay. So basically, I'm getting content from you by reading the book. So if I'm going to move from the book to something else, there's two things that I, as a reader, need to have. Number one, it's going to have to be better and different than what I'm currently reading. In other words, don't write down, here's a top 10 list, and then I'm going to go explain the top 10 list someplace else on my website. That's very frustrating. It needs to be, okay, I'm going to tell you the how, I'm going to tell you the why, and if you want to implement, if you need the how, then that's someplace else. Like, that's a reasonable upgrade, right? I got the theory in the book, and I get the practice or the actual help, the hand-holding offline.
If you want to do and experience how, that's another experience. That's another place.
Yep. That's like a different thing, right? Because it's also going to be probably a different medium, which comes to my second point, which is people don't like to move from one medium to another and have it be the exact same medium. Because I'm reading your book, and you say, come get a checklist of the 10 things you should never argue about.
Yeah, why didn't I put that in the book?
Why can't you just put the checklist in the book, right? Plus, I'm sitting here reading for now. Like, why am I going to close this thing and go read something else? So whatever you direct people to from the book, try to make it a different medium altogether. In other words, video, audio, some other way of engaging your audience. Because that makes sense, right? So I can't embed a video in the book. So if you want to watch a video on this, then you're going to have to move from here to there. But you absolutely want to include hooks that encourage your readers to come to your website and provide an email address to you so that you can start building a list and continuing to build your audience and then sell to them on an ongoing basis. And make sure you put it up front. So even before you start chapter 1, there should be a page that says, hey, by the way, these are some great, thank you for buying the book. As a reader, here are some things we're going to provide you, and just list them out and say, here's where you can get them. And the reason you want to do it up front, a lot of people say, well, why would I do that? They haven't read the book yet. The reason why you do it up front is because in Amazon, people like to use the take a sneak peek at the book feature that Amazon has. If you put it far enough up front in your book, that's actually part of that first 10% that people can see for free. So even if they don't buy your book, they might see that and still come to your website and see what you have to offer. Mm-hmm. So you want that to be part of that first 10% of content that they see.
Got it. That's great. So in other words, so I would say in the book we're going to explain, we're going to talk about why you should get yourself out of a bad conversation that never ends. And if you want to learn more on how to do that, you can find that at www.
Yep.
Okay, great.
Exactly.
Got it.
That's right. Mm-hmm. Yep. And I would put, create a very specific landing page for your readers. Yeah.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Make a specific landing page for the readers. Yep.
Yeah, exactly. And I would also sprinkle throughout your book conversations about you engaging in these conversations so that it's natural, right? So, in a coaching session we had with a couple, we experienced blah, 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 blah. Because then people are like, oh, that's what she does. Okay, I get it now.
Yep.
So I think that's good. I think those two ways, you hit the nail on the head early on when you said, signing your book at the back of the room is not going to be a good monetization tactic for you. If people get this mistaken idea that become an author and then suddenly you're going to make money on book sales. No. I don't know anyone who isn't a New York Times bestseller, not an Amazon bestseller, a New York Times bestseller who's doing that, who hasn't written literally 100 books. There are people who definitely make money. They can make a living off of ebooks, but they have written dozens of books, and they're getting a little on each one. They're playing this keyword SEO game, or search engine game with Amazon, but that's not a business model that most people really want. Your model, of course, is to monetize the content through your offerings and through your speeches.
Got it. Makes great sense, and I wouldn't have taken the book piece to that level without your conversation with you. So this is so valuable, Frank. Thank you so much.
Oh, great! I'm glad to hear that.
Totally valuable. Wow.
Good. Well, anything else you want to talk about books?
Gosh, my head is full. I'm looking over my notes, and I kind of want to go explore all these sites like Rev and CreateSpace, and I just want to kind of poke around and look at them. So, I've written down all the points. I just would probably have to make the notes a little bit more, 1, 2, 3, 4. But other than that, I don't think so.
Okay.
I don't think so.
Okay. Well, obviously there's a ton more to do here, but hopefully this gets you started down the process. I think you've got an awesome opportunity to not just have an ebook, but to have a physical paperback book that you can go in the back of the room and start signing. And it'll be the first of many, Wendy, I'm sure.
Well, aren't you kind? That would be great. That would be great. And I don't know if it's appropriate to ask you now or offline, but if there were any examples that you knew of that FAQ model where somebody's published one and I could just kind of look at it and go, wow, that's an FAQ and look how it came out. That's awesome.
Yep, I absolutely could do that. I'll send it to you offline. Excellent. Well, thanks so much, Wendy. I really appreciate you taking time with us today, and I'm excited about what you're working on. It's such a great mission, and I can hear the passion in how you describe it, and I know it's going to come out great on paper.
Great. Hey, I appreciate that. You're not the first one to say that the passion comes through my voice, and if we were in person, in my face. And so, again, we got to monetize my passion.
That's right. I'm all about that.
Right.
Oh, well, thanks so much, Wendy. It was a pleasure speaking with you.
You as well. Thanks again, Frank.
That is all the time we've got for today's conversation. Again, a big thank you to Wendy for joining us, and she has got some great stuff that she's putting together and some great material. We can't wait to hear how she puts that together into books, ebooks, and continues on with her strategy. So, thanks so much for joining us today. Again, we will continue the conversation. If you want to talk about using books to scale your business, that conversation is going on at Scale to Success. That's a Facebook group. You can get an invitation to that by coming to frankbria.com, smack in the middle of the page. Step 2 says join us at the Scale to Success Facebook group. Click on that, get yourself an invitation. That's where the conversation is going to happen. Or just come to Facebook, search for the Scale to Success group. That's where we are. If you want to implement, if you want to help increase your authority to scale your business, then you need to be in the Scale Mastermind. And that you get an invitation in the Scale to Success Facebook group. Or message me, send me an email, frank@frankbria.com, or go right online to the frankbria.com. Step 3, join us in our 7 Figures training and learn how to scale your business. And with that, we'll sign off for this week's episode. My name is Frank Bria. I've been your host. Thanks so much for joining us, and we will see you next time when we talk about using speeches to increase authority in your business. That's what's next. Speaking is next week. So join us next week. And thanks so much. Until then, make it happen.